I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as disturbing emotions arise, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. So this is dealing with disturbing emotions, means our basic obsession with ourselves, our basic ignorance, that is. You know, our ignorance just means that we have a strong sense of ego, and we really believe in it, and we grasp it very tightly. This sense of me as something very independent, unchanging, solid, real. My thoughts, my ideas, my memories, my dreams, my ambitions, me, 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 me. This causes all our problems, all our problems. We think if we could only satisfy me, that we would be happy. But the me doesn't exist in the way we think it exists, and so therefore it's insatiable. It can never be satisfied. It's like this huge, vast, vast emptiness into which we keep throwing things, but it's a big black hole. It can never, never be satisfied. And this basic grasping at this unreal ego that seems so real to us is the source of our suffering. So this is one way of beginning to tame this incredible monster inside us, which is always devouring all our attention, all our thoughts, all our emotions. Me, 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 me. Our minds are going around and around, me, 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 me. And everybody else is just there to serve me and my needs and my wants. It causes so much suffering, and we don't understand. We just think if we could only satisfy this, that we would be happy. But the more we try, the more suffering it brings. This is the tragedy of our present society, that in our present consumer society, these three poisons of our ego-grasping mind, along with our greed and our grasping and attachments and our aversions and anger and hatred, these are exalted in our present society. You know, I mean, it's been called, you know, the me generation, because everybody's thinking about me, me, me. And grasping and greed are out of, well, I mean, it's unbelievable. And now with, even in these societies, with advertisements and television and the media, people are, again, really believing if they could only have a car or a television or a refrigerator or the latest fashions, they would be happy. Because now these companies who make things, they spend millions and millions and millions. They spend crores of rupees on people who are trained to cultivate people's greed and make you want and think you need something which is entirely useless. And the more useless it is, the more they promote it as being essential for your happiness. This is a big problem. And along with that, of course, the rise of violence, because we can't get all those things. You know, you see other people have these things and I don't have them, so I feel deprived, and therefore I feel frustrated. I know I'm not going to get these things, so I lash out. And so then there are all these movies which are increasingly violent, and then the rise of terrorism, the rise of crime. These are just the three poisons. The three poisons, these disturbing emotions, these kleshas, these nyamongpa, which in our society are presented as being the way to happiness. It's very sad that the causes of suffering, which the Buddha pointed out, are now shown to us to be the path to happiness, which is why our society is in such a mess. So, we have to deal with these nyamongpa, these kleshas in our minds. There is a very famous example of, I think he was actually a Kadampa practitioner, and when he was watching his mind, he had piles of black stones and white stones. And every time a good thought came into his mind, he would put a white stone, and every time a negative thought, a thought dealing with his own self-importance, or with greed and grasping, or with annoyance and irritation and aversion, he would put a black stone. And at the end of the day, he would look. And in the beginning, of course, the black stones were many, and the white stones were few. I have a friend who used a different method. She has one of those clay, sort of like a bowl, but it's sealed and it's just got a slit, and you put money in it. And when you want to get the money out, you have to break it. And every time she has a negative thought, or especially if she says something negative, she puts money into it. And then after a few months, it's pretty full. So then she smashes it, and she gives the money to some poor family, or somebody who needs money. So this is a good, but nonetheless, we hope that gradually her money box will get more and more empty. But anyway, the point is that the reason for putting white stones and black stones was just to become more conscious of what's going on in our mind and what the usual contents of our mind actually are. Normally, because we're just thinking, even if a negative thought comes in our mind, then it's replaced by something neutral or something positive, and we're not even conscious. As we become more conscious, first of all, we become conscious of how negative our minds often are when things don't go right, how annoyed we become. And also we realize that when the mind is filled with negative emotions, the mind is not peaceful. Negative emotions disturb the mind. So if we're feeling very concerned and worried about ourselves, or if we're feeling we want something very much, so we're feeling greed, or if we're feeling annoyed or irritated, or if we're jealous of somebody because they've got something we don't have, or if we're feeling very full of ourselves, full of pride, the mind is not peaceful. The mind is not calm. Whereas when we're feeling thoughts of contentment, satisfaction, renunciation, goodwill, happiness in others' achievements, the mind feels good. The mind feels peaceful and happy. So it's even self-serving to try to change the contents of our minds to more positive states, because we feel better. So it says, therefore, as soon as disturbing emotions arise, endangering myself and others, harming, negative emotions harm us first, because they make us, not only do we create negative karma, We create karma with our thoughts too, by the way. We shouldn't think that it's just speech and physical actions which create karma. Our thoughts also create karma. So if we have negative thoughts, we are creating negative karma. So we should be careful. So in this way, it endangers me, but it also endangers others, because if we have negative thoughts, we tend to act out those thoughts. We tend to speak out those thoughts. And that hurts others. Anything which we say and do with the good, positive states of mind, such as kindness, contentment, joy in others' pleasures, and so forth, could never hurt others. But actions which we commit out of greed and desire and anger and irritation and envy and jealousy, they're very negative actions, very negative speech, and they do harm others. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, we can just, you know, there are so many books on psychology and all these things, but when you come down to it, you look at all the actions in the world, you can just pin it down to the three poisons. All the wars, all the terrorism, all the civil unrest, all the corrupt politicians. It's all the three poisons. It's all the three poisons. Our essential egoistic grasping, and from that our greed, attachments, desires, and our anger and hatred and aversion. So we cannot cure society until we begin to deal with those negative feelings inside ourselves. It's no good pointing a finger at someone else. The problem lies inside ourselves. It always lies inside ourselves. And this is good news, because, you know, we may not be able to change and transform everyone on the outside, but we can, of course, change what's going on inside. As Shantideva says, you know, that the world is covered in sharp stones and thorns, and so what are we going to do? You know, to walk on the ground, we can't carpet the whole world. But of course, by wearing a pair of sandals or shoes, we can walk everywhere without being harmed. And likewise, the world, this is samsara. This is samsara. What do we expect? But samsara itself can be the means for us to transform. So if we transform our minds, the whole world is transformed. Okay, so verse 4 says, I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings, as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. Now, normally, of course, we want to be surrounded by people who are kind, good-natured, who we can trust, who are good friends to us, and with whom we can live in harmony. And the Buddha himself praised again and again harmony. Harmony in the Sangha, harmony amongst families, amongst friends, amongst society. Harmony and being able to trust people and to be surrounded by people who are loving and kind is a wonderful blessing, a great, great blessing. Nobody is saying otherwise. But it's rather like if we spent all our lives just lying around on nice soft couches and chairs and eating good food and lying around. Well, that's very comfortable. But we will end up becoming very fat and flabby, very out of condition. So if we want to be toned up and become strong, with good, strong, flexible bodies, what do? I mean, if I say, okay, I want to get nice, strong, muscled arms, if I just keep picking this watch up and down, well, it's very nice, but it's not going to get me anywhere. If I want to get toned arms, I have to pick up heavy weights. If you want to get a toned body, you go to a gymnasium. Now, gymnasiums are full of equipment, which is designed, basically is designed to thwart us. In other words, it's designed to be very difficult. Resistance. Right? People are on those machines pumping away. And if it's too easy, they turn it up so it's harder again, right? And in the beginning, it's very exhausting, but in the end, you get into it, you get toned. And likewise, on the spiritual path, we need obstacles. We need challenges. We need difficulties. Otherwise, we become spiritually very flabby. And we think we're much, much more advanced than we really are. It's so easy to be loving to people who are lovable. But the question is how to be loving to people who are obnoxious. Do you understand? This is very, very important. Of course, it doesn't mean, therefore, you have to become completely obnoxious just so as to be able to help all your Dharma family, you know. But it does mean that we shouldn't always look for the easy way out. And that when people are difficult, as it says here, I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings. It means difficult, awkward people. I will learn to cherish them as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find, because finally somebody to practice on. You know, there's the well-known story of Paldanatisha, who was the founder of the Kadampas, and his attendant, his shabji, was this very ill-natured, grumpy, and difficult Bengali monk. And so the Tibetan disciples of Paldanatisha kept saying, well, look, get rid of him. He's absolutely horrible. You know, we'll take care of you. And Atisha said, what are you talking about? You're all so nice to me. I don't learn anything from you. This guy, he's absolutely awful. I treasure him. How will I learn patience without this guy around to thwart me all the time? In Buddhism, the heavenly realms, of which there are 26 different levels, the point in the heavenly realms is that they are always pleasurable. That we get whatever we want, we just have to think of it and it appears. It's very, very lovely. Beings have bodies of light, so they never get sick. They never get hungry. They just enjoy themselves endlessly as a result of good karma. But spiritually speaking, this is a spiritual dead end. From a Buddhist point of view, this is really useless. Because you don't learn anything, you're just marking time. There's no incentive to practice. Because you've already got everything. Most people come to the Dharma because they have suffered. Suffering isn't a problem. Suffering is our opportunity. I sometimes tell the story of when I went to see an astrologer to find out about whether I should go back into retreat or whether I should start a nunnery. And so the astrologer in India, in South India, he looked and he said, well, if you go back into retreat, very peaceful, very calm, very blissful, very nice. If you start a nunnery, many problems, many conflicts, many difficulties. But both are good, so you decide. So I thought, right, back in retreat. And then I met with this Catholic priest, and I told him, and he said, well, it's obvious. You start the nunnery. He said, we are like pieces of rough wood. And if we are always stroking ourselves with silk and velvet, that is very nice, but we don't get smooth. In order to get smooth, we need sandpaper. So people who are difficult, people who disappoint us, people who don't do what we want them to do and do what we don't want them to do, they are our sandpaper. They are the sandpaper to make us smooth. So far from being an obstacle to our practice, they are our practice. Do you understand? Really, this is so important because this is such practical teaching on how to use those difficulties which we come across in our daily lives, the difficult people, the difficult situations, how instead of resenting them and trying to avoid them, we can say, oh, fantastic, this is my chance. How are we going to learn patience? How are we going to learn to cherish others more than ourselves unless we meet with these difficult people and these difficult circumstances? This is so important. There is a saying somewhere that life is the gymnasium of the soul. And so, indeed, this is what our life is for. It's not just to sit back and have a good time. It's to learn, to grow up. The Buddha talked about ordinary people like us as the children, as a childish. And so what we're trying to do is grow up and become mature. And you know, when you see a little baby, right, you see little toddlers, right, they're very small and they're trying to walk, they're learning how to walk. And so they stagger a bit and then they fall down. And then they pull themselves up again and they go a few more steps and they fall down. And then they pull themselves up and they keep going like that until gradually their legs begin to get stronger. And that's like us on the spiritual path. We try, and then we fall down. But then we pull ourselves up again, and we try again. I mean, if those little babies said, this isn't working. Those other people, they've got strong legs, they can walk. But me, I've got weak legs, I can't walk. I'll never be able to walk. I'm just a weak-legged little baby, that's it. And sat down and never got up again, then they would never learn to walk. But fortunately, babies don't think like that. Babies think if they can walk, I can do it. And gradually they can. And likewise with us. Yes, we fall down flat on our face. Okay. Well, we learn from that. Now we stand up and try again, and a few more little steps, then we fall down again. Okay, pull yourself back up. Try again. That's what this life is about. It's about learning how to walk properly, to walk balanced, like grown-ups. So it's really important, really the most essential point here is that, first of all, we should just get out of our own light and let others take the spotlight. And we should realize that when difficulties come to us, this is our opportunity to take these things and use them on the path, as the path. In the Tibetan tradition, they talk about taking obstacles onto the path, because then we don't have to discriminate. Oh, this is difficulty, this is good. I mean, this is not just New Age philosophy. One time I went to Apu Rinpoche, actually. Not this little young one, but the previous Apu Rinpoche. And I was telling him about all my problems. And I was, saying about obstacles. And he said, if you say obstacle, it's an obstacle. If you say opportunity, it's an opportunity. And so everything which happens to us is our opportunity. How are we going to grow? How are we going to cultivate? Unless we have challenges, unless we have the opportunity to grow. So all of these negative qualities in our minds also are the manure in which we can cultivate the beautiful flowers in the heart. And there are many ways of dealing with negative emotions, from learning to accept them and learning to transform them, or, tear them out. There are many different levels of dealing with our negative emotions. But the most important thing is to realize that, first of all, we all have negative emotions. Unless one is a fully enlightened Buddha, we all have problems. Who does not have problems? Everybody has problems. Outer problems, inner problems, secret problems, subtle problems, ultimate problems, problems. And if we say problems, then it's a problem. If we say this is our opportunity to learn, to use, to cultivate, then it's an opportunity. Our nuns in Himachal, in my nunnery, they have a compost pits nowadays. So all the leftover food and guk and everything is thrown into the compost. And then, if you mix it with cow manure and straw and things like this, then after a while that compost turns into the most wonderful friable soil and fertilizer. And then you spread that out on the garden and all the beautiful crops arise. So the very negative qualities which we have in our heart, if we learn how to deal with them skillfully, are the very means for us to cultivate the Bodhi tree. So none of us should despair. And in the meantime, all of these difficulties which come to us are our opportunities to learn, to transform. Otherwise, we just become complacent, nothing. We don't move. So it's not a matter of thinking that, if I'm in the world, then I have no chance to practice the Dharma. People are always saying, oh, I have no time to practice Dharma. Every breath we take, if we are conscious, is a practice. Every person we meet, if we step out the way and put that person as the most important person in that moment, wishing them to be well and happy, is a practice. Every thought that arises, if we are conscious, is a practice. What do we think practice is? It's not just sitting there going, oh, money, payment, money, payment, money, payment, and our minds thinking 1,000 things. Everything which we do, if we do it with awareness, every word we say, if it is done with a kind intention, every action we perform, if it is for the well-being of other beings, is a Dharma practice. Our whole life is a Dharma practice. What do we think Dharma is? It's wonderful. Everybody we meet is our opportunity to practice. Nice people, difficult people, especially difficult people. Oh, good, they're so horrible. Now I can really practice. But it's true, you know, these Tibetans who were in jail, in prison for 20, 30 years, they say at the end of it they were so grateful to their gods because through that they really learned how to practice. They really, before that, compassion, patience, all that was up in the head. It was something you debated. But when you're faced with somebody who is ill-intentioned and is going to hurt you again and again and again, you really learn. Either you develop compassion and loving kindness, or you're finished. So they came out radiant. I mean, Adu Rinpoche, who Sato Rinpoche was talking about yesterday. Adu Rinpoche was in prison for 25 years in a hard labor camp. And when I met him and I said to him, you know, it must have been very difficult being in prison for so long. And he said, oh no, it was just like a retreat. And they fed us. So most of you are not going to be in a Chinese hard labor camp. But samsara is its own kind of labor camp. And we have to learn to convert that into a pure land. And that comes from our pure intentions of our heart. Okay, now I am going to demonstrate compassion and finish on time so you can all go and have a tea break, okay? And as you have a tea break, please remember that all the beautiful nuns who are serving you also wish to be happy, and on the whole they are happy, but as you accept your tea from them, then please say thank you, look into their eyes and smile at them sincerely. Thank you. So we will resume the verses now, these 8 verses by Geshe Langri Tangpa. And verse number 5 and verse number 6 I will read together because they are very similar. Verse number 5 says, when others out of jealousy treat me badly, with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer the victory to them. When the one whom I had benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. So we're dealing again with what we started with, is the fact that people, even people that we trust, that we love, often even our own family, our siblings, our brothers, our sisters, our partners, our husbands, our wives, our children, people that we should be the most in harmony with and whom we trust and love, very often they are the ones who create the most problems for us. how often one hears of sibling rivalry, of brothers and sisters trying to cheat each other out of inheritance, or undercutting each other in various ways. And this is especially painful because these are our own family. This is my brother, my sister, my cousin. And so it's very hurtful. People that we trust, that we have done good to, who turn around and repay our goodness by trying to harm us or get advantage of us. So then we have two choices, basically. Either we can get angry, resentful, really upset, you know, thinking it over and over and over and not letting it go. Well, he hurt me, so I'm going to hurt him back even harder. And we can do that, and people do that. It's common, and people agree, yes, you have every right to get him because he was so mean to you. But as we know, that doesn't solve anything. You know, you hit me, so I'll hit you, then you hit me, and I'll hit you harder. And you all end up with broken bones. It doesn't solve anything. As the Buddha himself said, hatred never ceases by hatred. Hatred only ceases by non-hatred. And so at some point, this cycle has to be cut. And seeing that this other person is not going to cut it, it's our responsibility. And the way to cut it is what is given here. When others, out of jealousy, maybe, you know, often this happens with, you know, you get something and some promotion or some kind of good fortune, and then instead of rejoicing in your accomplishment and your happiness, people get upset and angry and envious and try to cause trouble. So when others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, you know, people say nasty things. People say nasty things about each other. And often it is because of envy, because of mean-spiritedness. It's an interesting phenomenon that we don't often rejoice in the happiness and well-being of others. And that there's a feeling, a frisson of pleasure almost in others' downfall. Human beings are really quite mean sometimes. And we should see if that comes in us. When we hear of somebody else's good fortune, what is our first reaction? Do we rejoice? Or is there a spirit of envy and jealousy? Because it's not just people out there doing this to us, but what do we do to others? Do we slander? Do we say mean things? But in any case, if other people abuse us and say nasty things about us, so what? Personally, I always say, as far as criticism goes, that if people say bad things about me, then I think, okay, is what they're saying true? Are they pointing out faults which I haven't noticed? In which case, I'm really grateful. Thank you. I needed that. And if after honest examination, I know it's not true, then what's the problem? We never get upset when people say nice things about us. So why should we care when people say not nice things about us? Who cares? It's only words. So, he says, when others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse and slander and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer the victory to them. Now, in any competition, in any game, in any play, there is going to be a winner and a loser. Someone is going to be defeated and someone is going to be victorious. Why do we think we always have to be victorious? What difference does it make? We have vowed as Dharma practitioners to bring happiness to all beings. How are you doing? What is your record? As Dharma practitioners, are you genuinely concerned more with the happiness and well-being of others or your own self-concern? This is the question. Not just, oh yes, I'm a great bodhisattva, I have vowed to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings. I'm such a special person, and I do my practice every day, and I've done thousands and millions of mantras, and I'm so special. And then the very simplest thing in the world, and we are just as concerned with our own well-being and unconcerned with others' well-being as anybody who's never even knows the word Om Mani Padme Hum. What's the use? What's the use? If the Dharma just makes us more bloated in our egoistic self-concern, then better get rid of the Dharma. It's no use. If it just makes me a bigger, better, more spiritual me, better have no Dharma. You know, Dharma people are not necessarily any nicer than ordinary people in the world who've never even heard the word Buddha. In fact, sometimes they're a lot worse. They have a reputation for being pretty difficult. Why? When these teachings are here, so clear, absolutely clear. We never have to wait till we're all enlightened to become kinder, more thoughtful, more patient, more caring of others, less concerned with me. That's the sign of a true Dharma practitioner who's got themselves out the way. Not concerned with themselves, they're concerned with others. So, therefore, even if people treat me badly, even if people are difficult, still, let them. Okay, fine, I give them the victory. I will take the defeat on myself. Why do I always have to be number one? Somebody wins, somebody loses. Okay, I'll lose, they'll win, and then they'll be happy. And then I'm so glad that they're happy. We should be able to rejoice in the fact that others can win and we can take the defeat, and that's no problem. This is all hitting right at the heart of our ego absorption. Everything which the ego protests about, these verses are saying, go on, do it. The ego is just total self-cherishing. And our self-cherishing attitude is what causes all our suffering. Suffering to ourselves, suffering to others. Believe me. The more self-cherishing we are, the more trouble we have. The less we, if we would just get rid of the whole ego obsession, it would be like dropping a whole big rucksack, a backpack of heavy, heavy stones that we're trying to walk up the mountain. And then we would feel so light. We would feel so light. But nobody can do it for us. Each one of us is responsible for walking the path. Even the greatest lamas in the world, His Holiness, can sit there, he can talk to you until he's blue in the face, and it doesn't help if you don't take his teachings and use them. There's no lack of teachings. There's loads of teachings. Teachings are everywhere. You can all read. You can all understand what you read. But just reading and having it all up in the head isn't going to change anything. You just get a bigger head. It has to come from the head right into the heart and change something here. That very deep self-cherishing mind has to be uprooted. Otherwise, all the Dharma, so-called Dharma accomplishments just increase the ego. Really, we have to ask ourselves this, again and again. Am I better than I was last year? Paldanatisha again, he said that if you go into a year's retreat, then when you come out of retreat, the thing you have to ask yourself is not how many experiences I had or what great realizations arose in the mind stream. The question you ask is, are my negative defilements, my ego absorption, my greed, and my anger, have they got less, more, or the same? And if nothing has improved, if greed and self-absorption and anger still spontaneously arise in the mind stream in exactly the same proportion or even more than before, then that meditation retreat was a waste of time, and it doesn't matter what experiences you got. Because all our practices are for seeing through the fiction of our ego. That's all. And opening up the heart to embrace and interconnect with all beings, and realizing that other beings are more important than myself, because other beings are so many and I'm just one. So then the next verse says, again, when the one with whom I had benefited with great hopes unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. So again, the point is that when somebody really hurts us, we can allow them to hurt us and sit there nursing our hurt and our self-pity. Because it's just self-pity, really. Oh, look, I'm so sad that I believed in that person, and now that person has hurt me. And of course there is that first grief, that's natural. But if we keep on and on thinking about it and thinking about it, then that is just another ego game. Rather than that, we should realize that this person is an excellent spiritual guide. They are helping me to overcome my attachment, to deal with my habitual way of dealing unskillfully with difficult situations. teaching me patience, compassion. You know, when people are bad to us, when people cheat us, when people are unkind to us, it's because that person inside is suffering. A person who is really happy and at peace within themselves normally would not harm another being. People get mean and nasty and grasping and greedy because inside they're in pain. They might outwardly look okay, but inside they're not okay. And so therefore, the appropriate response should be compassion. Compassion and patience and the ability to allow them the victory. In short, I will learn to offer everyone without exception all help and happiness, directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all harm and suffering of my mothers. So, of course, this also refers to the practice, which I'm sure all of you know, the practice of Tonglen. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what Tonglen is? Okay. So I don't need to go into it. But Tonglen basically means that we visualize taking in the suffering of others and breathing out all our own health and well-being and happiness. And so it's this ability to accept the suffering of others into ourselves and to transmute that into happiness. And also during our day, everybody that we meet, we should be determined to, within whatever is our ability in that particular time and relationship, give them happiness and friendship, and to be able to absorb whatever harm and suffering they have. Even if we cannot do it physically, at least our intention should be to accept their suffering onto ourselves. This whole idea of taking on the suffering of others and giving out well-being is something which is really very powerful. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I was living in London, and I was playing with a ball, and it ran next to an electric fire. And I was wearing a nylon dress, so my nylon dress hit against the fire, and next thing I knew, I was all up in flames. And because it was nylon, of course, it burnt very quickly. And at that time, my mother, she was ill in bed with kidney stones. So she herself was in tremendous pain. Kidney stones are very, very painful. And so she was lying upstairs in bed. If she had not had kidney stones and been in bed, she would have been in a shop, in which case I wouldn't be telling you this story. But she was sick, very ill herself in her room. So then I ran up the stairs from the kitchen, and of course I was screaming and screaming. And then I ran into her bedroom, and I was just sheets of flames. So she wrapped me in a sheet, and then I remember I left the body, and I was up by the ceiling looking down on the body, and there were all these beings. I mean, it was a near-death experience. There were all these beings of light saying, "Come with us, come with us." And so I thought, oh, I'm going to die. Oh, that will be interesting. Let's see what happens. And I very much wanted to die and go with these beings of light. I did not want to go back into this burnt little shriveled body lying on the bed. But anyway, meantime, the neighbors had heard my screams, so they started coming in to see what had happened. And next thing I knew, I was back in my body again. And then the next thing I remember was being in hospital on a trolley, and the doctor saying to me, "Oh, you're a very brave little girl. You must be in tremendous pain." Because my whole back was burned off. My mother said my whole back was just one huge blister, and also the side of my face. Anyway, so the doctor said, "You must be in tremendous pain." And I said, "No, there's no pain." And he looked at me a bit funny, but he didn't say anything. So I was in hospital for weeks and weeks, but there was no pain. Now, if you burn even the tip of your finger, you know how much it hurts. My whole back was burned off. There was no pain. And I don't have any scars. And years later, I was mentioning it. At the time, I was a child, so I didn't even think about it. And all the nurses and doctors thought I was being very stoic, very brave. Years later, I discussed it with my mother, and she said that at the time when I was lying on the bed unconscious, then she had prayed. She was a spiritualist, so she prayed to the spirit guides. And she said, "Please don't let her die. And please don't let her suffer. She's too young to suffer. Give all her suffering to me. I will take her suffering. I want her suffering. Give it to me." And as a result of that, surely, when I gained consciousness, there was no pain. She did not get the pain. She was already in pain, but she would have rejoiced to have my agony if I could have been freed from it. Isn't it? And that, of course, is a mother to her child, that a mother will rejoice to take on the sufferings if her child could be freed. But that sense we must give to all beings, because it says, all harm and suffering of my mothers. So it's like a child with the mother. Also, the child would happily take on the sufferings of her parents. And that sense of tremendous love and compassion, which would rejoice if we could receive the sufferings of others. We would be so happy. That is what we have to learn to cultivate. So the Buddha, when he taught loving kindness, he starts by saying, just as a mother loves her child, her only child, so we must develop a heart which is boundless and limitless towards all beings. So we start. We start with those who are nearest and dearest, and then, our colleagues, our Sangha members, people that we meet. We work on our heart to open it, to accept with joy the pain of others and give them our own happiness in return. Conversely, if we can really open up our heart, we end up being happy. We don't end up being miserable. If you look at all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they're all smiling. Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, he's smiling. He's smiling because also he has great wisdom along with his compassion. And in his great wisdom, he does not cling to the idea of little egos, these large, solid little egos. So it says in the Prajnaparamita texts that even though we vow to save countless beings, actually there are no beings to save. And of course there's no one to save them. So therefore it says, I will keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena like illusions, will be released from the bondage of attachment. The 8 worldly dharmas are gain and loss, praise and blame, happiness and suffering, and a good reputation and a bad reputation. In other words, we want to gain, we want to be happy, we want people to praise us, and we want to be well known and admired, and we do not want the opposites. We don't want loss, we don't want to be miserable, we don't want people to slander us and say bad things, and we don't want to get disrepute. And therefore, because we are always trying to get the one which seems so nice and avoid the one which, like, we want to gain, but we don't want to lose. We want to be praised, but we don't want to be criticized. So there is always this fear. Because things are very insecure. Today somebody says something nice about me, but maybe tomorrow they'll say something really nasty. Or behind my back, they will say something nasty, even while they're praising me to my face. Today, I've made lots and lots of money, but then the stock exchange collapses and now I'm poor. Today, somebody I care for really loves me, and tomorrow they leave because they go with someone else or because they die. It's very, very insecure. And so we have fear, as His Holiness said. We have fear because you never can be sure. Everything is impermanent. And so if we do even our Dharma practices with, in the back of our minds, this attachment to the 8 worldly concerns, then we're in trouble. Because then again, it's just increasing our ego attachment. I mean, all of us have to deal with these 8 worldly concerns. They come into everything, even happiness and sadness, the most basic. Gain and loss, praise and blame, good reputation, bad reputation. How much that one does is influenced by that. And then that is just another ego game. It's all just an ego game. And we have to go beyond the ego. These verses are trying to help us to go beyond the ego by putting other people in front as more important. I mean, as I said, there are many ways to go beyond the ego. But one of them during our everyday life is this way, of making other people more important. So that our concern is for the happiness of others, and we're not concerned with our own happiness. Mostly we're only concerned with our own happiness. If other people do things which make me happy, then they're nice people. If they do things which make me unhappy, then they're difficult people. It's all with reference to me, me, me. And this is like a prison. It's a prison. We're all imprisoned. But there's a key to get out of that prison, and that key is the Dharma. But this key, if we just put it up on the shrine and we bow down and worship it and we make offerings and we chant praises, it's not going to get us out of prison. You have to take the key and fit it in the lock and open the door and walk out. In other words, the Dharma has to be used. We have to practice. And practice doesn't just mean sitting with your Dhammarus. I mean, in mature practice, you offer up your body. Well, this is a kind of everyday chur practice. You're offering up your ego. Actually, this is true.